So today I'm busting through my fabric scraps to make this adorable tote bag. And the best part, you can use it as a purse, a bag, a book bag, or even a summer beach bag. No two bags will ever look the same, so let me show you exactly how to make it. Okay, so what I've done is I've sorted out some of my scraps into colors that I thought would look good together, like these reds and purples and tans. And so I put them in rows and in different size pieces, and I'm going to sew each of the pieces end to end, and then I'm going to sew each of the rows together to make one big panel of fabric. And then when I'm done, I'll cut it up into the segments that I'm going to use for the front and back of my tote bag. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to take it to the machine. I'm going to sew this all up and iron it, and then I'll meet you back here to show you what I'm going to do next. Okay, so I finished sewing all my scraps together to make my panel, and I cut off the edges and straightened them out. And so what I'm left with is a piece that is about 21.5 inches long by 16 inches long. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to cut a 9-inch piece by 16, and I'm going to cut 2 of them. And this will be our middle panel for our purse. And then I've already gone and cut the blue jeans, and I cut a 3¼ inch piece by 16 for the top. I cut 2 of those, and 2 5 by 16 inch pieces for the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this scrappy panel, and then we'll put it all together, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so now all we have to do is lay out our pieces and sew them together. So you'll sew this 3-inch piece to the top and the 5-inch piece to the bottom. Okay, so I've sewn both of my panels and they're ready to go. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut some fusible fleece. Now you can use batting, fusible fleece, fusible foam, or any kind of interfacing in your panels that you want. It depends on how sturdy that you want it. If you want it to be really sturdy and to stand up on its own, you'll probably want to use the foam. I'm going to go ahead and use the fusible fleece. And there's others that are equivalent to this that you can use too if you prefer. So first I'm going to measure out the size of each of my panels. So the width is about 16, and then the height is also about 16. So I'm going to cut my fusible fleece at a 1/2 inch smaller. So I'm going to do 15.5 by 15.5 to iron onto the back of our panel. Okay, so I've finished both my panels. I ironed on the fusible fleece, and then I did some quilting, and I just did a wavy stitch, and I was just going over where the rows meet, in the ditch, and just kind of doing that wavy stitch in between. And I did that all across the top of each side. And if you don't want to quilt, you really don't have to, but if you just want to do something simple, the wavy stitch is really good, or you could just do a straight stitch. And I top stitch where the blue jean and the scrappy panel meet up here at the top, and I did the same thing to the bottom. Okay, so now that we've got both of these done, the only other step to do to the top is to turn mine over, is to cut our corners here at the bottom. And you're going to do this to both sides of both panels. And so I made a 2-inch template out of some cardstock, and then I'm just going to use my water soluble pen to mark it, just like that on both sides. And then I'll cut this piece out with some scissors. So you'll want to go ahead and do that to both of your panels. Okay, so to make our straps, you're going to need a strip that is 3 inches by 22 inches of your blue jean fabric. And then I've also cut a 1-inch by 21-inch strip of fusible fleece. Now, for the fusible fleece, we're going to iron it down about 1/4 inch away from the edge, like this. And I cut it shorter so that we can fold our ends over, So I've already done that to one strip, and I'll show you. And went to the iron. I ironed down the fusible fleece, ironed down the ends over about 1/4 inch, and then the 1/4 inch right here on the edge, on both edges. So you're going to fold this down, and you're going to bring this other folded edge over to cover this one. It's like this. And then you can clip it or pin it, and then you should have a 1-inch width strap by doing it this way. And I'm just going to pin it all up, and then I'll go to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch all the way around it, even on the ends here, on both sides, all the way around. And I'll do that to both the straps. Okay, so I finished sewing up the handles for the bag, and now I'm going to place them on the front. So I've already marked my center, and I want to place them about 2.5 inches away from the center. So I'm just going to take my ruler and just measure right about here. Okay, and I'm going to place them right down to the top sewing line here, just about a tad bit above it, so you can still see that sewing line. Okay, and so I'm going to do that on both sides, but the front side, I want to put right in the center a flower that I made. It's a fabric flower, and I made this flower with one of the clover flower makers, and I'll put the link to that in the description below. And all I did was just take a few of the pieces of blue jean, some matching solid burgundy, and some of these other colors in my scraps, and I made the petals out of those. So I'm going to place that right there, and then I'm going to put a button in the middle to embellish it. Just going to sew that button on there. And then also I was thinking I want to place some buttons on my straps here. Just going to place them about 1 inch above the bottom, just to give it some embellishment. And you can go and like place a button on each side here in this band, and then you could do the same thing on the back. And I also wanted to tell you that when you go to sew your straps on, I'm just going to go right along where I sew the top stitch on here and make a rectangle. I'm just going to cross over here about 1 inch from the top, and then I'll just do a crisscross in the middle of it. And I'll do that on all of my straps when I attach them to the bag. Okay, and then when I go to put my flower, I'm going to do this by hand, and the other buttons as well. And you want to do that before you do the lining. Okay, so I've cut out my lining, and I'm just using the denim fabric that I purchased from Walmart, and it's rather thin. It's not like a really thick denim, so I think it'll be good for the lining of our bag. And you can go ahead and put some fusible fleece on this as well, or just some interfacing to give it a little bit more body if you want, especially if you're going to use just cotton for your lining. I'm not going to put any. Okay, and I've already cut out my 2-inch squares at the bottom. So this is ready to go, and I've gone ahead and I've cut out a 9 by 6.5 inch piece of fabric. I've cut 2, and I'm putting them face down. I'm going to make a pocket to put on one of the linings, and so it's really fairly easy. You just cut them both the same size and put them right sides facing, and I did put some interfacing on one side just to give the pocket some body. And I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around and just leave an opening here at the bottom so that I could turn it out. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you how to attach it to the lining. Okay, so I trimmed around it a little bit, and I trimmed off my corners. Okay, and I'll just use my little turner tool here to poke out those corners. Okay, and then you can just tuck in this bottom portion here, and I'm going to stick a clip in it. And then you're just going to go ahead and place it centered here on my lining. And I want to come down because we're going to have our snap up here, so I don't want it to be too high up. I'm going to place it about 4 inches from the top, just like so. And then I'll pin it in place, and all you have to do is just start up here at the top and then sew a top stitch all the way around until you get to the top on this side, and that'll secure your pocket down. So one more thing before we sew our pocket down, you'll want to take it to the machine and top stitch the top first. And I'm going to put 2 lines of top stitching at the top. Okay, so my pocket is sewn on, and now all we need to do is put on our magnetic snap. Now if you prefer not to have any snap at all, that's fine. You can leave it open. But I want to use this as a purse, so I like to have that security of making sure that, I can close it if I want to. First, I'm going to find my center by folding it in half. And then I'll just take my scissors and snip a teeny little tiny corner right there at the top. And then you can see where your center is. I'm going to do this on the back. So from the back, I want to take one of these, This is like a stiffer interfacing. I think it's craft fuse interfacing, and I'm just going to iron it down, spot where I want my snap. But I'm going to measure down 1.5 inches from that center at the top. That way we can account for our seam allowance. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to iron this piece of interfacing right at the center spot. Okay, and it's a little crooked, but that's okay. Now, I'll use my ruler, measure down from that where I marked the center here, and then I'll mark it at 1.5. And I'm going to use my seam ripper just to go through here and cut a little slot, just a little bit, on each side of that center mark. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here backwards with my, where I marked it, just so I can poke through the front, okay? And then I'll take it to the front and place my snap. Then you want to put your little washer on top of that, and then I just push them out. Push them down as flat as you can, just like this, okay? And then if you want, you can go and place another piece on top of it, just to give it some security. And I just iron, around it so that it'll stay, okay? So that's our first snap. And then we're going to do the same thing to the other lining piece. Okay, so now we've got them both on. I'm going to line them up to make sure that they are good. All seems good. Okay, so now we can put our bag together. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to line up our bag. I put the snaps together. That way I know that they are all lined up. And put it out. And I'm just going to take it to the machine, and I'm going to sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance down both sides. And then when we get to the bottom part, I'll show you how to do that. Okay, and so once you've sewn the sides, you'll sew the bottom portion of your bag. And don't forget to leave about a 3 to 4 inch opening at the bottom in order for us to turn the bag out. And you'll want to backstitch on when you end on these two sides, just so that it doesn't come apart when you turn the bag out. So for this corner here, you will take your bottom, you'll pull it apart, and then you'll match these openings like this, and then make sure to nest your seams here. So once you've nested your two seams there, put a clip in it, and I'll do the same thing on either side, or you can put pins. And then you'll take it to your sewing machine, and you're going to sew a 3/8 of an inch across this opening here. You'll do that to both of your corners on the bottom of your bag. Okay, so I've sewn each of our corners on the ends. So I'm just going to leave this inside out for now. Next, we're going to do the front and the back of our bags. And to do this, you're just going to line them up right side spacing. And you're going to do the same thing that you did to the liner, except for this time, you're going to sew the entire bottom. Don't leave an opening. And remember, we're using a 3/8 inch seam allowance on this as well. Okay, I just want to show you when you're pinning and sewing the sides, that you want to make sure that where you put your blue jeans on both the front and the back, that you're lining those up. When you put it on your machine, it's going to be a little bulky, but as long as they're lined up together so they look the same on the back as in the front. And I'm just using clips because it'll hold it pretty well. Okay. So I've finished sewing up the main bag, and now we're going to turn it out. Okay, so now that we have our bag turned out with the right side, we're going to take our lining and we're going to stuff the bag into the lining so that the main bag and the lining are right sides together. And I want to make sure that my pocket is going to be on the side farther away from me. I want it to be on the back side of that. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure also that your handles are inside that lining. Okay, and then where I made that little notch in the center, I'm going to match those together. Stick my pin on there or a clip. And then when we get to our sides, we want to make sure our seams are lined as well, like put them in opposite directions with your seam. Nest them together. And you'll just do that all the way around. And you can put as many clips or pins that you need, and making sure that whenever you get to the handles, to push them down as much as you can so that they don't get in the way when you sew around the top. Okay, and before we sew this around the top, I'm going to add a little loop on the end here that whenever I go to put keys in my purse, I can latch it onto that loop with a swivel hook, you know, and then that way I won't lose my keys because it happens. Okay, so that looks good. Now I'm going to make the little loop, and okay, so I just cut me a little piece of fabric that it's like about 5 by 2.5 inches. And so I'm just going to fold it in half long ways and then open it and fold it towards the middle from both ends and then fold it again. Just like this. And then I'm going to top stitch on both sides. Okay, and now I'm going to take my loop and I'm going to cut it down to about 3.5 inches. And I'll fold it. And I'm going to bring it over here to my purse. So what you're going to do is on one of the ends of these, you're going to take your loop. You want to put it in upside down with the raw edges coming out. I'm going to put it right slightly to the side of where these seams nest into each other so that they're not all in the same area, and it'll be really bulky if you did that. So place this that way. I've got a clip where my seams meet, and then the loop is right to the side of it. Okay, and so now I'm going to sew all along the top with a 3/8 inch seam. Okay, so now we have it all sewn up. We can start pulling the bag right side out, and we're just going to go into the bottom where you left that opening in the lining and start pulling out the bag. Once you've got it all turned out, you can tuck the lining right back into the bag. See inside where we have our pocket and then our snaps, snap right together. So there's one last step that we need to do to consider this done, and that is to top stitch the top. Okay, and so you want to make sure that you get this top lining in the bag even. Pull it down just a little bit, straightening out the seams, and you can go in and iron this part too if you want to make sure to keep it down. So now I'll just go in with my clips. I'll clip these together, both the lining and the bag. And all you have to do now, after you've clipped it all, is go in and sew a top stitch all the way around the top. And this way you can get kind of decorative too if you want. You can sew a straight stitch, you can sew a decorative stitch if you'd like. And I'm going to use that same gold thread that I've been using for top stitching. So I'm going to finish lining all this up, and I'm going to top stitch it, and then I'll show you the finished result. Okay, so there is one more thing we need to do, and that's remove our lining and fold it at the bottom where you have the opening, and just pin that or clip it. Just sew that lining right across the bottom, right across where the opening is. So here we are. I just love how it turned out, especially the flowers and the buttons. And now I have to ask, would you use this as a purse, a shopping bag, a book bag, or what would you use it for? Please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you love scrappy sewing projects like this, check out my channel for my other projects and this next video coming up. And I'll see you there. Bye-bye for now.